Hi everyone. My name is Nicholas, and at 34 years old, I work as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle, where I've been married to my wife Molly for 8 years, sharing a modest two-bedroom house with our golden retriever, Max, and no children yet, though we've talked about it in those hopeful moments that seem to fade more each day. Our marriage started with the kind of passion that comes from late-night conversations and shared dreams, but lately, it's been marked by a quiet emotional neglect, where Molly, a dedicated medevac nurse whose shifts pull her into the chaos of emergencies at all hours, often returns home with her mind still hovering over distant helicopter pads and hospital corridors, leaving me to navigate the silence alone. Despite this, I've clung to a fading hope that things could reignite, like embers waiting for a breath of wind. It was a Thursday evening in early autumn, the kind where the rain patters softly against the windows like a persistent whisper, when the emotional shock hit me like a sudden crack in the foundation of our home. I had just finished setting the table for dinner, the aroma of garlic and rosemary from the roasted chicken filling the kitchen with a warmth that contrasted the chill seeping through the drafty seals around the door, when Molly walked in from her shift, her scrub still faintly scented with the sterile tang of antiseptic and the faint, metallic hint of blood that she could never quite wash away. She dropped her bag by the entryway with a heavier thud than usual, her shoulders slumping in a way that made her seem smaller, more burdened, and as she kicked off her shoes, white sneakers streaked with mud from the hospital parking lot, she avoided my gaze, her eyes darting to the floor where Max lay curled on his bed, his tail thumping lazily against the hardwood. I tried to greet her with the usual affection, stepping forward to wrap my arms around her in a hug that had once been our ritual, feeling the cool fabric of her uniform against my skin and inhaling the mix of her lavender shampoo mingled with the day's exhaustion, but she pulled back slightly, her body tense like a wire pulled taut, offering only a quick peck on my cheek that felt more obligatory than intimate. "Long day?" I asked, my voice carrying that hopeful lilt I always injected to bridge the growing gap between us, watching as she moved to the sink to wash her hands, the water rushing out in a steady stream that drowned out the soft jazz playing from the speaker on the counter. She nodded, her reflection in the window above the sink showing lips pressed into a thin line, and as she dried her hands on the dish towel, its edges frayed from years of use, she mentioned casually, almost too casually, that she was going out later that evening with her friend Jocelyn from work, for a quick drink at that new bar downtown, the one with the exposed brick walls and craft cocktails we talked about trying together someday. The words hung in the air like the steam rising from the chicken as I carved it, the knife slicing through the tender meat with a soft, yielding sound, and I felt a subtle unease settle in my chest, a tightness that made my breaths come shorter, though I pushed it down, telling myself it was nothing. Just the fatigue from my own day staring at code on dual monitors under the harsh fluorescent lights of the office. But as we sat down to eat, the clink of forks against plates echoing in the quiet room illuminated by the warm glow of the pendant lamp overhead, I noticed her phone on the table vibrate once, then twice, its screen lighting up with notifications that she quickly dismissed with a swipe of her thumb, her fingers moving with a practiced swiftness that seemed almost furtive. When I glanced at her, hoping for some shared conversation about our days, she was staring at her plate, pushing peas around with her fork in slow, deliberate circles, her face illuminated by the soft light that cast shadows under her eyes, making her look more distant than ever, as if her thoughts were already miles away, racing toward whatever awaited her that night. That unease lingered as she excused herself to change, her footsteps creaking up the stairs to our bedroom, where I heard the rustle of clothes being pulled from drawers and the zipper of her jeans sliding up, sounds that were familiar yet now carried an undercurrent of something unspoken. I cleared the table alone, the plates scraping together with a ceramic clatter, and as I loaded the dishwasher, the hum of the machine starting up like a low rumble, I couldn't shake the feeling that this ordinary evening was veering off course, like a car drifting slowly toward the edge of the road. Max whined softly from his spot, sensing my restlessness perhaps, his wet nose nudging my hand as I stood there, staring out the window at the darkening sky where streetlights flickered on one by one, their orange halos blurring in the rain. When Molly came back down, dressed in a simple black top and jeans that hugged her figure in a way I hadn't seen her wear for our dates lately, her hair loose around her shoulders and a touch of makeup accentuating her green eyes, she grabbed her keys from the hook by the door, the metal jingling like a faint alarm. "Don't wait up," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her hand lingering on the doorknob for a moment too long, as if hesitating, before she stepped out into the night, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty house. This moment marks the initial fracture in Nicholas's trust, a subtle yet profound emotional shock that disrupts the marital equilibrium. Psychologically, it exemplifies the onset of cognitive dissonance, where Nicholas's hopeful but fading emotional state clashes with emerging suspicions. The wife's hesitant body language, lingering hand, forced smile, signals internal conflict, possibly guilt or anticipation of betrayal, while Nicholas's observation of environmental details like the echoing door amplifies his isolation. Themes of denial emerge as he rationalizes her behavior as work-related, a common defense mechanism to preserve the illusion of stability. Interpersonally, this neglect fosters resentment, eroding the bond through unspoken voids. The first warning sign was already here, in the nonverbal cues often dismissed as insignificant, yet they foreshadow the betrayal's consequences, such as emotional detachment. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain, as unaddressed doubts compound into deeper wounds, hindering personal growth until confrontation forces reckoning. I sat on the couch afterward, the leather cool against my skin, flipping through channels on the TV where mindless sitcom laughter filled the room but failed to penetrate the growing fog in my mind, wondering why her phone, left charging on the kitchen counter, an unusual oversight for her, felt like a silent witness to something I wasn't yet ready to face. The hope I'd held onto was fading, replaced by a quiet anxiety that twisted in my gut like the knot of a rope slowly tightening, and as the clock ticked onward, its hands moving with inexorable slowness, I found myself glancing at her phone more often, the screen dark and unyielding, hiding whatever secrets it might hold. The next morning dawned with a muted gray light filtering through the curtains of our bedroom, the kind of overcast Seattle sky that presses down like a weight, and as I woke to the sound of rain drumming steadily on the roof, I reached out instinctively to Molly's side of the bed, feeling only the cool, rumpled sheets where her warmth should have been. She had slipped in late the night before, around 2 in the morning, her movements quiet but not silent enough to escape my light sleep, the creak of the front door, the soft thud of her bag hitting the floor, and then the whisper of her clothes being shed in the darkness before she climbed under the covers, her body curling away from mine with a sigh that carried the faint scent of bourbon and something else, a musky cologne that wasn't mine. I lay there now, staring at the ceiling where faint water stains from last year's leak bloomed like abstract art, my heart beating a little faster as fragments of doubt assembled in my mind, piecing together like code compiling into a program that revealed an error I couldn't ignore. Over breakfast, the kitchen filled with the rich aroma of coffee brewing in the French press, its steam curling upward in lazy spirals, Molly moved about with a forced normalcy, her hands trembling slightly as she poured milk into her mug, the liquid sloshing against the sides with a soft splash. "How was your night with Jocelyn?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light as I buttered my toast, the knife scraping against the crust with a rhythmic crunch, watching her face for any flicker of unease. She paused, her spoon stirring the coffee in slow, deliberate circles that created tiny whirlpools on the surface, and when she looked up, her eyes met mine for only a second before darting away to the window, where rain streaked the glass in rivulets. "It was fine, just catching up," she replied, her voice steady but with an edge, like a blade hidden in silk, and as she sipped her coffee, the mug hiding the lower half of her face, I noticed the way her free hand fidgeted with her napkin, folding and unfolding it into smaller squares, a nervous habit she'd had since nursing school but one that appeared more frequently now. The day wore on at work, my office cubicle bathed in the artificial blue glow of my computer screens, the hum of keyboards and distant conversations blending into a white noise that usually soothed me, but today it only amplified the restlessness gnawing at my insides, like a program running in the background consuming more resources than it should. During lunch, as I unwrapped my sandwich in the break room, the crinkle of the foil echoing off the sterile white walls, I checked my phone, hoping for a text from Molly, something affectionate or mundane to reassure me, but there was nothing, just the empty notification bar staring back like a blank canvas. That evening, when she got home from her shift, the house already dim with the early winter twilight, she greeted me with a hug that felt perfunctory, her arms loose around my shoulders, and as we prepared dinner together, chopping vegetables on the wooden cutting board, the sharp thwack of the knife against carrots punctuating the silence. I caught her glancing at her phone more often, its screen lighting up her face in brief flashes that highlighted the furrow between her brows. It was later that night, as we sat on the couch watching a documentary about ocean depths, the narrator's voice droning on about hidden worlds beneath the waves while blue light flickered across the room, casting wavering shadows on the walls adorned with our wedding photos, that the first real crack appeared. Molly's phone buzzed on the coffee table, the vibration rattling against the glass coaster with an insistent hum, and she reached for it quickly, too quickly, her fingers curling around it like a protective shield as she angled the screen away from me. I pretended not to notice, focusing on the TV where bioluminescent creatures glowed in the abyss, but my peripheral vision caught her thumb swiping across the screen, deleting something, a call history, perhaps, or messages, her movements swift and deliberate, her lips pressing together in concentration. When she set the phone down, face down this time, the soft click of it against the wood seemed louder than it should, and she shifted closer to me, her leg pressing against mine in what might have been an attempt at normalcy, but her body was rigid, the muscles in her thigh tense under the fabric of her leggings. Here, suspicion escalates through small evidences, highlighting the psychological toll of secrecy on both partners. Nicholas's heightened awareness of sensory details, the phone's click, rigid posture, reflects hypervigilance, a stress response rooted in eroded trust. Emotionally, this breeds anxiety and frustration, as his internal reflections oscillate between hope and doubt, embodying denial's grip to avoid painful truths. The wife's furtive actions, like deleting history, suggest compartmentalization, a coping strategy for infidelity that fragments her identity between roles. Interpersonally, this creates a cat-and-mouse dynamic, where her overcompensation, physical closeness, masks deceit, further alienating Nicholas. A typical mistake is to think that this is just a phase, ignoring how such patterns signal deeper emotional neglect. Consequences include intensified betrayal trauma, potentially leading to self-doubt in Nicholas, but also seeding personal growth through eventual self-reliance. This event underscores how microbehaviors erode relational foundations, pushing toward inevitable discovery. That small act lingered in my mind as I lay awake later, the bedroom shrouded in darkness broken only by the faint red glow of the alarm clock on the nightstand, its numbers ticking forward relentlessly. Molly slept beside me, her breathing even but shallow, her back turned, and I replayed the evening in my head, the way she'd laughed a bit too loudly at a joke on the show, her hand covering her mouth as if to muffle it, the subtle scent of that unfamiliar cologne clinging to her hair when she leaned in for a goodnight kiss. Doubt crept in like the chill from the slightly open window, where a draft carried the earthy smell of wet soil from the garden outside, and I wondered if her mental absence, that elsewhere quality she'd always had as a nurse dealing with life and death decisions, was masking something deeper, something that explained the emotional neglect I'd felt growing like weeds in our marriage. Hope flickered weakly, telling me it was just work stress, but suspicion was taking root, fed by these small inconsistencies, leaving me staring into the void of the ceiling, my pulse quickening with each unanswered question. The following days blurred into a haze of routine overshadowed by my mounting unease, the office becoming a refuge where I buried myself in lines of code, the click-clack of my keyboard a rhythmic distraction from the storm brewing at home, but even there, in the sterile air-conditioned space scented with stale coffee and printer ink, my thoughts drifted back to Molly's furtive phone habits. I started paying closer attention, noticing how she'd take calls in the other room, her voice muffled through the walls as she paced, the floorboards creaking under her steps, or how she'd angle her body away when typing messages, her shoulders hunched protectively, the soft taps of her fingers on the screen echoing like coded signals I couldn't decipher. One afternoon, while she was in the shower, the water running with a steady hiss that filled the upstairs bathroom with steam, I found myself drawn to her phone left on the dresser, its black screen reflecting the afternoon light slanting through the blinds in golden stripes, and with my heart pounding in my ears like a drumbeat, I picked it up, my fingers slick with sudden sweat as I swiped to unlock it, only to find the call history suspiciously empty, wiped clean as if no conversations had ever occurred. That deletion fueled my suspicions, turning them into a quiet investigation that I conducted in stolen moments, like checking the browser history on our shared laptop late at night, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the dark living room where Max snored softly on the rug, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. I found nothing at first, cleared caches, no incriminating searches, but then, in the trash folder of her email app, buried among spam and forgotten newsletters, I spotted a receipt for a hotel room downtown, dated for a night she'd claimed to be on an overnight shift, the PDF attachment opening with a click that sent a chill down my spine, the details listing a king bed and late checkout, scents of luxury linens and anonymity wafting through my imagination. I closed it quickly when I heard her footsteps descending the stairs, the wood groaning under her weight, and as she entered the room, towel-drying her hair with vigorous rubs that sent droplets flying like tiny sparks, I forced a smile, my voice steady as I asked about her day, all while my mind raced, piecing together the puzzle with a growing dread that tightened my chest like a vice. Red herrings appeared to muddy the waters, like when Jocelyn called the house one evening, her voice bright and casual over the speakerphone as Molly chatted about work anecdotes, laughing at shared memories of chaotic flights, the sound tinkling like glass but ringing false to my ears now attuned to deception. I wondered if Jocelyn was covering for her, her words flowing too smoothly, but when I casually mentioned the bar outing later, Molly's eyes widened slightly, a micro-expression of surprise flickering across her face before she recovered, her hand reaching for a glass of water on the counter, the liquid trembling as she brought it to her lips. My internal struggle intensified, trust warring with evidence, moral qualms about invading her privacy clashing with the pain of potential betrayal, as I lay awake, the bedroom air thick with the scent of her night cream, floral and cloying, while she slept soundly, oblivious or perhaps feigning it. Then came the moment of truth during dinner a few nights later, the table set with pasta steaming in bowls, the garlic bread's crusty aroma mingling with the candle's vanilla flicker that cast dancing shadows on the walls. As we ate, forks clinking against ceramic in the quite punctuated only by Max's distant panting from the hallway, Molly's phone buzzed on the sideboard, its vibration rattling the wood with an urgency that made her freeze mid-bite, her fork hovering inches from her mouth. Before she could react, a message preview popped up on the screen, illuminated in the dim light. "Can't wait to see you again tonight, same place?" Eric, the words searing into my vision like a brand, the name unfamiliar yet stabbing with implication. This pivotal discovery shatters denial, thrusting Nicholas into acute betrayal trauma, where the message acts as undeniable proof, evoking shock and anger. Psychologically, it triggers the fight-or-flight response, evident in his physical reactions like dropping the fork, symbolizing loss of control. Themes of trust violation dominate, as the deleted histories and red herrings, like Jocelyn's call, culminate in this emotional apex, forcing Nicholas to confront moral dilemmas in his investigation. Emotionally, mixed feelings, pain, determination, illustrate the grieving process for the lost relationship. Interpersonally, Molly's panic reveals gaslighting tendencies, attempting to deflect blame, which exacerbates relational damage. The first warning sign was already here in prior oversights, but now consequences manifest as relational collapse. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain, as evidence demands action for healing. This event catalyzes personal growth, transforming passive hope into active empowerment, though initially through profound hurt. Time slowed as I stared, the room's warmth turning oppressive, my fork slipping from my fingers with a clatter that echoed like thunder, and Molly's face drained of color, her eyes widening in panic as she lunged for the phone, her chair scraping back with a harsh screech against the floor. In that instant, the air thickened with unspoken accusations, the candle's flame wavering as if sensing the tension, and my heart hammered against my ribs, a mix of anger and sorrow surging through me like a tidal wave crashing against the fragile barriers I'd built. I sat there, hands gripping the table's edge until my knuckles whitened, the wood's grain pressing into my palms, as she stammered an excuse about a work colleague, her voice cracking like thin ice, but the lie hung heavy, undeniable now, leaving me teetering on the edge of confrontation, the quiet house suddenly alive with the weight of secrets unraveling. The message hung in the air between us like a storm cloud ready to burst, the pasta cooling untouched on our plates as the candle's wick sputtered, sending wisps of smoke curling upward in the tense silence that followed Molly's frantic grab for her phone. I watched her fingers tremble as she clutched it to her chest, her nails, painted a soft pink that I'd complimented just days ago, digging into the case, and her eyes, wide with a deer-in-headlights fear, met mine for the first time that evening, reflecting the flickering light that cast harsh shadows across her pale face. "It's not what you think, Nicholas," she whispered, her voice breaking on my name, a plea laced with desperation that only fueled the fire igniting in my chest, a heat that spread through my veins like molten lava, making my breaths come in shallow, ragged bursts. I pushed back from the table slowly, the chair legs dragging across the floor with a low groan that mirrored the ache in my soul, and stood up, feeling the room tilt slightly as adrenaline surged, the scent of garlic now cloying and nauseating in the confined space. "Then what is it, Molly?" I asked, my words measured but edged with steel, each syllable dropping like a stone into the quiet, watching as she rose too, her body language shifting from defensive to cornered, her shoulders hunching as she backed toward the kitchen counter, the granite cool against her palms as she gripped it for support. She hesitated, her lips parting and closing without sound, a fish gasping in air, and in that pause, the grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, each second stretching into eternity, amplifying the psychological tension that coiled around us like invisible chains. As the silence stretched, broken only by Max's uneasy whine from the doorway where he paced, his claws clicking on the tile, Molly finally spoke, her excuses tumbling out in a rush. "Eric's just a friend from the hospital, a pilot we work with on medevac runs. We were talking about shift schedules, nothing more," but her eyes darted to the side, avoiding mine, and her hand fluttered to her throat, fingers tracing the chain of the necklace I'd given her on our anniversary, a gesture that screamed deceit louder than words. I stepped closer, the floorboards creaking under my weight, and demanded to see the phone, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay composed, feeling the heat flush my face as anger battled with the raw pain of betrayal, a storm of emotions swirling in my gut like the rain now lashing against the windows in furious sheets. She handed it over reluctantly, her arm extending slowly as if through molasses, and as I scrolled through the messages, texts filled with intimate details, plans for secret meetings, emojis that twisted the knife deeper, the truth crashed over me, undeniable and shattering, the screen's glow blurring through the tears welling in my eyes. "How long?" I choked out, my throat tight, watching her crumble against the counter, her knees buckling slightly as she slid down, tears streaming down her cheeks in silent rivulets that caught the light, her sobs hitching in her chest like broken machinery. "A few months," she admitted, her voice a whisper drowned by the thunder outside, revealing that the emotional neglect I'd attributed to her job had been a cover for stolen afternoons with Eric, a man whose face I now imagined, strong-jawed, confident, from the profile picture in the chat, a twist that made my world spin. The confrontation escalated in waves, my accusations flying like arrows. "You've been lying to me, deleting everything, making me doubt my sanity," met with her gaslighting attempts. "You're overreacting, it's just emotional support because you've been so distant," her words stinging like salt in wounds, her body language shifting to aggression as she stood, pointing a finger at me, her face contorted in a mix of fear and defiance. But as the argument peaked, a knock at the door interrupted, sharp and insistent against the storm's roar, and when I opened it, there stood Jocelyn, drenched and wide-eyed, her umbrella dripping on the porch, confessing in a rush that she'd known about the affair and couldn't keep silent anymore, her voice trembling as she glanced at Molly, adding an unexpected layer that shattered any remaining illusions. In that cinematic moment, rain pounding like applause, I felt a strange calm descend amid the chaos, realizing I could only control my response, the empowerment budding like a fragile shoot in the ruins of our trust. The confrontation represents the climax of psychological tension, where raw emotions, anger, despair, surface in intense dialogue and body language, facilitating catharsis. Nicholas's composure amid Molly's panic highlights emotional regulation, a sign of growth from denial to acceptance. Themes of betrayal consequences emerge starkly. Trust's irrevocable breach leads to relational dissolution, with Jocelyn's twist adding layers of communal deception. Emotionally, Nicholas navigates swings from rage to resolve, embodying resilience. Interpersonally, Molly's excuses and gaslighting attempt manipulation, but Nicholas's insight into self-control marks boundary setting, crucial for healthy dynamics. A typical mistake is to think that this is just a phase, prolonging agony. Instead, confrontation exposes truths, enabling freedom. This event underscores personal empowerment, as Nicholas shifts from victimhood to agency, fostering long-term growth through learned wisdom on vulnerability and authenticity. In the aftermath of that stormy confrontation, the house felt like a hollow shell, echoes of our raised voices lingering in the corners where shadows pooled deeper than before, and as Molly packed a bag the next morning, her movements jerky, stuffing clothes into the duffel with hurried shoves that rustled the fabric like whispers of regret, I stood in the doorway, arms crossed over my chest to hold in the fragments of my shattered heart, feeling the cool morning air seep through the open door, carrying the fresh scent of rain-washed earth. She avoided my gaze, her eyes red-rimmed from a night of tears, her hands pausing occasionally as if second-guessing, the zipper's rasp finally sealing her departure with a finality that hung heavy in the air. "I'll stay with Jocelyn for now," she murmured, her voice muffled by the weight of consequences, and as she slung the bag over her shoulder, the strap digging into her flesh, I nodded silently, the decision to let her go solidifying in my mind like concrete setting, a quiet collapse rather than an explosive end. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, the lawyer's office smelling of polished wood and old books, where I sat in a leather chair that creaked under my shifting weight, discussing asset division and divorce papers with a detached calm that masked the inner turmoil churning like a sea in storm. Family weighed in, my brother calling from across the country, his voice crackling over the line with concern, urging me to seek therapy, while Molly's parents sent terse emails laced with blame, their words stinging but failing to pierce the armor I'd begun to forge around my emotions. Financially, it was a tangle of shared accounts and mortgage payments, each spreadsheet on my laptop screen glowing with numbers that represented years of joint effort now unraveling, but through the setbacks, like discovering hidden credit card charges for dinners and gifts, I found small victories in reclaiming control, transferring funds with deliberate clicks that echoed my growing resolve. Internally, conflicts raged, nights when doubt crept in, lying on the too-large bed where her absence left a cold void, the sheets tangled around my legs as I wrestled with memories of happier times, the scent of her perfume fading from the pillows like a ghost departing. Anger flared hot, then cooled to sorrow, a cycle that left me exhausted, my body heavy as I forced myself through routines, walking Max in the park, the leash taut in my hand, leaves crunching underfoot in autumn's crisp air, his joyful barks a reminder of simple joys. But amid the moral dilemmas, had I been neglectful too, lost in work while she sought solace elsewhere? Clarity emerged, a quiet empowerment in choosing freedom over a fractured union, symbolized by the door closing behind her that final time, its latch clicking with a sense of release. I made the decision in a moment of stillness, sitting on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink that warmed my face, the air buzzing with evening insects and the distant hum of traffic. No dramatic speeches, just a text to Molly confirming we'd proceed with divorce, my fingers steady on the phone, the send button pressed with a soft tap that severed the ties. Relief washed over me like a gentle wave, muscles relaxing for the first time in weeks, a lightness settling in my chest as I breathed deeply, the world expanding beyond the confines of betrayal. This decision phase illustrates the aftermath of betrayal, where Nicholas grapples with inner conflicts but emerges with clarity, emphasizing themes of personal growth and consequences. Psychologically, the quiet collapse allows processing grief stages, anger to acceptance, without melodrama, promoting healthier emotional recovery. Symbolism like the closing door signifies closure, releasing manipulative ties. Interpersonally, family impacts and legal hurdles test resilience, but small victories build confidence, transforming neglect scars into self-sufficiency. Emotionally, relief supplants tension, highlighting empowerment's rewards. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain, as decisive action prevents stagnation. Consequences include financial and social adjustments, yet they pave growth paths, teaching self-worth and boundary enforcement for future relationships. Confidence built in small steps, rearranging furniture, the scrape of legs on floor marking new beginnings, and as I sipped coffee alone in the mornings, the steam rising to fog the window, I felt the tension ease, preparing for a life unburdened by deception. With the divorce finalized in a quiet courtroom months later, the judge's gavel striking with a sharp crack that echoed off the paneled walls scented with varnish and dust, I stepped out into the spring sunlight, its warmth soaking into my skin like a balm, the air alive with blooming cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze like confetti celebrating my newfound freedom. Boundaries were established firmly, no lingering contact beyond necessary logistics, our shared assets divided equitably, leaving me with the house and Max, symbols of stability amid change, and as I drove home, the radio playing an upbeat tune that made me tap the steering wheel, a sense of empowerment bloomed, quiet and steady, like roots taking hold in fertile soil after a long winter. Life reshaped itself in subtle ways. Mornings began with solitary runs along the misty trails, my sneakers pounding the damp earth in rhythmic thuds, sweat beading on my forehead as endorphins cleared the fog of past pain, followed by coffee at a local cafe where the barista's smile and casual chat introduced new social threads. Hobbies resurfaced, picking up the guitar, gathering dust in the closet, fingers callousing anew as chords filled the living room with melody, the strings vibrating under my touch like echoes of inner harmony. Friends old and new filled the voids, dinners with colleagues turning into laughter-filled evenings, the clink of glasses and shared stories weaving a network of support that bolstered my confidence, each interaction a step toward independence. Reflecting on the betrayal, as I sat by the window one evening, the golden hour light slanting across the floor in warm pools, casting long shadows that danced with the sway of trees outside, I understood the lessons etched into my psyche. Emotional neglect had been the fertile ground for deception, but recognizing it taught me the value of self-awareness, the importance of nurturing connections without losing oneself. The pain, once a sharp blade, had dulled to a scar, a reminder of growth rather than defeat, and in quiet moments, sipping tea whose steam carried hints of chamomile and calm, I felt gratitude for the clarity, the betrayal a catalyst for shedding illusions and embracing authenticity. Closure came not in vengeance but in catharsis, a sense of strength forged in solitude, where the house no longer echoed with absence but hummed with possibility, Max's tail wagging as we played fetch in the yard, the grass soft underfoot and scented with fresh clippings. Wisdom settled like a gentle fog, trust must be earned, boundaries protected, and personal empowerment the true path to freedom. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in vibrant strokes, a slight hope flickered for what lay ahead, a life unscripted, rich with potential, leaving me at peace, empowered, and whole. Overall, the narrative traces a classic arc of betrayal from subtle signs to empowerment, underscoring psychological themes like eroded trust leading to denial, then confrontation's cathartic consequences, culminating in personal growth. Nicholas's journey reflects common human responses. Initial rationalization preserves hope, but accumulating evidence forces awakening, revealing emotional neglect's role in infidelity. Interpersonally, deceit fractures bonds, yet resolution fosters independence and wisdom. Key lessons include recognizing warning signs early, avoiding silent suffering, and viewing betrayal as a catalyst for self-empowerment, ultimately offering catharsis through freedom and renewed purpose.